All right, so we are on the no calculator test, so go ahead and keep that put away for a while. We're on number 8. Good old word problem. Our friends who were here this morning found out that word problems do not mean scary math problems. Actually, word problems usually mean easy math problems, so don't be afraid. And number 8, you're not going to be able to use any sort of highlighters. All you can use, like, for tools on the test is literally a pencil. So if you're a highlighter, you're going to have to use pencil for that. The speed of sound, s, in meters per second, is a linear function. So that right there tells me they're going to want me to interpret this function in something that you guys are comfortable with, which is this form. Remember y equals mx plus b? That's the linear function model that we typically use. And a very important skill for you guys on your SAT math test on both calculator and non-calculator is the interpretation of this. So slope is m. Remember, that's rate of change. But the b value, you guys know, is the y-intercept. That has a couple different names in math. So like the y-intercept, some of you when you were smaller called it like a starting point of a graph. It's where you graph it, you start on the y-axis. It's when you're, you plug in a 0 for x, that's why it's a starting point. But anytime you have a story problem, it's your initial value before any rate of change happened or any time occurred. So when I read through this question, I really did a good job of highlighting here. I crossed off half my problem. It says s of t equals 0.6t plus 331.4. Which of the following statements is the best interpretation of the number 331.4? So they're asking me to interpret the y-intercept in this equation. So s, meters per second, t is temperature. So you're plugging in 0 for t. That's the definition of your y-intercept. So when t equals 0, you're going to get a y-intercept at 331. So let's look for that guy. It's got to be somewhere here. The speed of sound. And okay, I think we're done. It's A. See right there? Okay. So anytime they ask you to interpret the y-intercept, it's the, quote, starting point of your problem. So when you plug in a 0 for your input variable, that's the starting point of your problem. So plugging in a 0 for t, that's a 0 for temperature. Duh. I was really making a big deal about that one. Now, I can tell you what I like about the SAT math test, the new version of it. It's very predictable. So you're going to have multiple questions that are just like that, where it's a story problem in a linear function, and they're asking you to interpret the slope and the rate of, the slope and the y-intercept. So if you remember, slope is rate of change, rise over run, and y-intercept is the starting point. That's essentially the basis of those questions. Ooh, 9, I love. We have, remember, no calculator. We have a system of equations. This one happens to be a quadratic. And it does say where x is greater than 0, what is the value of xy? Now, as a test taker, that makes me nervous right there. Because sometimes I'll get to the end of this question and then I'll answer the wrong question. They want me to figure out what x times y is. Just keep that in mind. This feels like a really good substitution problem. Because remember, there's a few methods for solving these, but substitution seems like the way to go. So y is x squared. That means anytime I see a y, I can plug it in, substitute it for an x squared. So 2 times x squared plus 6 equals 2 times x plus 3. Okay, bit of bad news. We do have a quadratic. This is a 2x squared plus 6, and then distribute carefully. This is a 2x plus 6. Oh, that's not too bad. Subtracting the 2x over, the 6's are going to cancel. So 2x squared minus 2x equals 0. Anytime I'm solving a quadratic, typically we're setting it equal to 0, and then we're either factoring it, square rooting it, completing the square, doing something. But do y'all notice that we can just hit everything here by a divide by 2? So we do get 2 answers here. We get an x squared minus an x equals 0, which we could factor out an x. I'm really writing over my problem. This is terrible. And remember how it said way at the back here, I kind of scribbled it out. There was this random clue about x being greater than 0. This is the moment why we need that clue. Because if I set each of these factors equal to 0, I get x equals 0, and I get x equals 1. Which one of those answers do I want to keep? I got to keep x equals 1. So if x equals 1, plug that baby back in right there, that means y equals 1 squared, so y also equals 1. Well, this is boring. The answer is 1. 1 times 1. So those are the kind of questions where kids get a little nervous because they're like, ew, that's a lot of algebra in one. That's actually the way I did this question the first time. Sorry to kill your time here, but when I originally did this question, I graphed it. But that's because I'm like a person who really likes graphs of things. So I graphed this really basic quadratic function. And those of you who know me know that I really did a stellar job on graphing. That's a joke. I do horrible graphing. So right here it said x had to be greater than 0. So instead of graphing the whole quadratic, I just graphed this half of the quadratic because x had to be greater than 0. And then this side, this equation over here, is technically a line, which I think I solved, and I kind of graphed it in y equals form. I just took a graphing approach on that one, and it worked out really beautifully. So if you get to the point in the question where you're like, oh my gosh, my algebra has put me into like a loop and I can't figure out how to get out of it, like some of you struggle with your algebraic solving, try graphing it a little bit. So sometimes kids can graph and at least eliminate down to 2 instead of 4 answer choices that work, and then they can make an educated guess. All right, this one, oh boy. That's not an eraser. They have a squared plus b squared equals z, and then a times b equals y. All right. And then they have, what they really want from you is 4 times z plus 8y. So again, this feels like maybe a system, some sort of a substitution question. I think what we can do here is just plug some stuff in. So z is this. So I'm just going to stick that in for z, using parentheses, of course. I have no more packets left, guys. I heard I have no more tests left. Oh, wait. There's one left? Oh, that's not the right one. You can take that one. It's test number 5 we're working on. I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd be this popular today. I thought Monday after spring break, there's no way all those kids are going to show up. And here you are. I'm sorry. I'll make more copies. I'll give them to you in the middle of the day tomorrow. Okay. But I will post the video, and I can post the PDF also. I don't know. I think I'm allowed to do that. All right, guys. So 4 times z, we're going to plug that in. Plus 8 times y, we're going to plug that in. And then let's clean this up. Oh boy. Let's see here. 4a squared. Oh my goodness. This is going to be a hoot. So what I just wrote down in black is equivalent to one of the answer choices they have. We got to figure out which one. Do you guys remember what happens when you have a binomial and it's squared on the outside of the binomial like this? Is this just as simple as squaring the first and second term to expand it? Is it? This is really like a foiling problem. So think about what's going to happen here, guys, is you're going to, like for instance, this one means a plus 2b times another a plus 2b. So I can already tell that that one's garbage because a times a is not going to give me 4a squared in the front. So, gone. And then I can tell that these two are garbage. So I guess the answer is B. Now, did you notice I didn't finish the question? Yes. Is that okay? Yeah, a little dangerous because, I mean, like, I'm not very careful and it's possible that I made a mistake somewhere in there. So if you felt like you were good on time, I would encourage you to finish the question all the way through. But if you feel like you're tight on time, which currently I am, you know, it's got to get to soccer, I would probably not finish the question. All right, number 11. Okay, more words, and then some of the words are geometry, so some of you already are like, oh no. Do you remember how geometry, there's a little formula sheet at the beginning of your test? It does tell you some stuff, and I think the word cylinder came up, if I remember correctly, on that problem. So there was a formula for volume of a cylinder, I think. Boom. And a cylinder, let's see, the volume is 22 cubic centimeters. What is the volume of a right cylinder with twice the radius but half the length? Oh, fun. Now I wouldn't actually bother finding out what the radius and the height were. This is what I want you to think about. The formula for a cylinder is the area of the base, which is a circle, pi r squared, times the height. Now think about this, guys. If you took the radius out of the problem, whatever it is, and you, what did they say, half it? No, twice it. If you doubled it, remember that that quantity is being squared. So what's happening to this coefficient here? Is it really a 2? It's really a 4. And then if my height was halved with no exponent on it, by what factor are you changing this problem by? It's really 4 times half, better known as 2. So you're really going to be doubling the volume. Okay, so you got to watch your exponents. So if this guy originally had a volume of 22, and then because of these factors, we notice we're going to be doubling the volume, apparently the answer is 44. Okay, that was a tricky question only because you had to remember that when you double the radius, when you square that factor, you're actually multiplying by a factor of 4, not 2. Okay, so just watch your exponents on any geometry formulas like that. A lot of kids freak out about geometry because they're like, I don't like it, or I haven't had it in 2 years, or whatever your excuse is. There's very few geometry questions on the test, and I can't even tell you what they're going to be. So, like on algebra, I can tell you exactly what things you have to study for. You have to study systems of equations, you have to study linear equations, you have to study quadratic equations. Like there's certain things I know will be on there. Geometry is a free-for-all. I have no idea. All right, 12. Oh boy, this question. You know how many times I've done this question? Okay, so we have 9 to the 3/4 power, which doesn't look too bad, does it? No, not at all. And then I look at my answers and I notice that they're in radical form. So then I have to remember how to convert from exponent form, rational exponent form, to radical form. So the way you convert it is that you have a base, and then up in his exponent, the formula is power over index. That's the fancy word for the root number. So like, for instance, if it's a square root, the index is a 2. If it's a cube root, the index is a 3, and so on and so on. So when I look at this question, apparently we're looking at a 4th root of 9 to the 3rd power. Well, bummer, because that's not any of my choices. So I have more work to do. Remember, guys, this is a no calculator question. If this was a calculator question, I'd just crank this in the calculator and walk away, but alas, here we are. So I need to think of a way to rewrite this. Pretty sure these 9s are out. In fact, I know this one's out because this is the 4th root of 9, and I'm supposed to have the 4th root of 9 to the 3rd, so garbage. And this one has the cube root of 9. I'm not really ready to eliminate that as a choice, but I'm not leaning towards it, that's for sure. So if I'm tight on time right now, I'd make a guess between C and D, and I'd move on. Anyone have a guess? Any reason why you guess C? Just 'cause. Favorite, yeah. And if you're flat out guessing, the middle ones are statistically a little higher occurring than the ends. So B and C. But that old adage of like, always guess C because it's always C. It's not always anything on the SAT, so I don't dislike your guess. How about that? Let's take a look at what we're going to do though. So we're thinking it's one of these two, which means I need to change my 9 to a 3 somehow. I think we got this, guys. Isn't 9 just 3 squared? Yeah. So if you thought of this as 3 squared with a 4th power on top of that squared, this is really the 4th root of 3 to the 8th power. Huh? Oh. No, what did I screw up on?
Where's the 3 go?
I don't know. What did I screw up on? Oh, it's a 3. Why am I was like, this doesn't work. Because I can't read. Guys, that wasn't a 3 at all. I wrote a 4. That was stupid. It's 3 to the 6th power. I was like, this is not working. Okay. That was good news for me, though, since this is a multiple choice question. I would have got really stumped for a minute. Okay, it's 6. Here we go. Do you guys remember what another way you could write 3 to the 6th power? We don't usually think this way, but we could. Isn't that the same thing? Why would I want to do that? What kind of jail are you in right now, guys? You're in a 4th jail. So if you could break these up into groups of 4s, you can hop out of jail is what we used to call it back when you were little. So the 4th root of 3 to the 4th, this hops out as a 3. And are you going to be able to divide this 2 by a 4? No.
It's opposite.
It's opposite day. Okay.
Oh, yes.
April Fool's Day. It doesn't hop out. And then you're like, well, what now? Because it still doesn't match any of our answers. Well, guys, you can reduce this a little bit. What's 2 divided by 4? Half. So I think our answer is this. Oh, I was D.
Wait, what?
Okay, I'll back up. How to get rid of what?
The 4 and the 2.
I didn't. What I did was I took the 4th root of 3 to the 4th as a separate problem as the 4th root of 3 squared. So some of you are like, that was fantastic. I would have guessed like 10 minutes ago. That was a really hard question. That was probably one of the hardest questions on this test. Okay? Okay. So once you right. So once you get to this step, I would hope you guys can at least remember how to go from exponent to radical. That would be good. And then as you look through, like, okay, this is what it's equivalent to. Well, there's no way it could match B, so that one's out for sure. And then maybe you can make a little guess on that one, all right? That was a really tricky question. Ah! I know. And you know what? Yeah, you guys bring up an excellent point. As you kind of got into that question and you kept, like, we kept hitting roadblocks, right? We were like, okay, how do you write that as a radical? Oh, good, it doesn't answer, like, none of my answers match. And then you did it again, and you're like, it still doesn't match. So maybe after, like, our second or third roadblock, we'd go, gosh, I don't know. And then we just make a guess and move on. And then, you know, willing, at the end of our test, we say, oh, good news, I have 2.5 minutes left. Guess which question I'm coming back to? This guy. This Everest of a question, okay? It's all right. So 13, good news. We're almost done with this horrid test. Ready? At a restaurant, N cups of tea are being made by adding tea bags to hot water. This sounds like fascinating stuff. All right, so T equals N plus 2. How many additional tea bags are needed to make each additional cup of tea? Okay, this question is asking about a very important vocab word. They're asking about rate of change. Every time you make a new cup of tea, you're adding something. They're asking about slope. Did the word slope ever show up in that question? So it's your job to interpret, oh, they're asking me slope. Remember on that last question a few ago where it was like, oh, they're asking me about y-intercept. This time they're asking about slope. So what's the slope? The slope's in front of the variable. It's 1. Okay. Oh, goodness. Now, wouldn't it have just been fabulous if they were like, hey, what's the slope? But they're not going to ask you that. They're going to say something stupid like, you know, interpret. All right, guys, 2 more, and then we're done with this test. People who join us a little later in the morning, we talked about gridded response being done before we get to multiple choice in case we ran out of time. Hey, fun fact, you're going to probably run out of time on this test, guys. I know it seems like a long time, 25 minutes to do 20 questions. They're not easy. Okay? Some of them are. Oh, this one should be pre-calc students. You got this. All right, come on. What happens when you throw a negative in front of a function? I heard the word flip. I'm okay with that. Reflect across the x-axis. So, all right, guys. So, remember, no graphing calculator. This is an exponential growth who was originally shifted up 1 unit. So your horizontal asymptote was up here at 1, and it looked something like this originally. So if you were to reflect that across the axes, you're going to end up down here. Find it. It's C. Very good. Now, can we just take a moment to appreciate the trickiness? A lot of kids don't really understand order of reflections and how that affects things. So a lot of kids were going to tell me, well, I think some kids just didn't remember exponential growth. That's the first issue. Are you guys okay why that was exponential growth and not decay? What in this function, this original function, tells me it's growth? The base is greater than 1. Yeah. And then the horizontal asymptote was shifted up 1. So that's, yeah, you had to kind of know a little bit about that, though. So they were asking just a very direct question there. That was pretty nice. And then to top things off here, a nice word problem. Everyone, oh, this is not a... Okay, I wrote a note. Very tricky. That's not good. Okay. Now, do you notice that this is the last question in a section? Because the one that comes after this is a gridded response. So what I want you guys to think about, and it's not a strict rule, but it's a rule of thumb. The test, the first few questions of every section are going to be kind of like, la-di-da-di-da, not too bad. And then there's going to be some weird stuff in the middle. And I'm not saying the last question every time is going to be a bear, but often you'll see that it's a bear. So if you end up running out of time on like the very last question, it's not the end of the world. You still make a guess. And that's why we saved the multiple choice for the end, because at least we have a 25% chance of guessing it right. at the worst, you know. So just hang with me on this one. Ready? Alan. Alan's averaging 100 miles each week. That seems important. His car can travel 25 miles per gallon. Alan would like to reduce his weekly expenditure on gas by $5. Assuming gasoline costs $4 per gallon, which equation can Alan use to determine how many... Oh, boy. Right there. That right there is the... This is why this question is tricky, okay? You have to remember at the end of this question that we are supposed to figure out how many fewer miles he's supposed to drive, okay? Keep that in mind. All right. So let's start with, let's see, miles, okay. So 100 miles per week, and he gets 25 miles per gallon. So how many gallons every week is he using? 100 miles per week. Yeah. Yeah, that's a quarter, yeah. 4 gallons. All right, so he's using 4 gallons of gas every week, right? And Alan would like to reduce his weekly expenditure by $5. Cool beans, Alan. All right, there's another clue here. I kind of hid it because I was drawing too big. But it costs $4 per gallon. So how much is Alan like spending every week right now on gas? $16. All right, very good. So he's spending $16 each week. Now at this point, maybe we would deviate approaches, right? Maybe some of you would say, okay, I think I have enough information to start plugging in things and making some educated guesses because I'm about to run out of time and I gotta get something down. Let's talk about how we can get the answer the quote right way, which means the math teacher way, and then you guys can get creative with me if you want. How much are we going to want to bring it down to? $11. So I need to somehow change it to $11 per week. How much does gas cost? Oh my gosh. Okay. Ready? Remember how you did this at the original? Yeah. Okay. Can we just call this like M? Ooh. Okay, we're good. Stuck all of a sudden. Hold on. Time out. I have all these words down here about how tricky this is, and it really threw me off. Okay. All right. We're good. Okay. Here's what we're going to do, guys. No, we're not going to skip it. Okay. So, number of miles, which I don't really know, okay? I know our truck is not going to change. It's going to get 25 miles per gallon, right? That's not going to change. And I know I got to multiply it by, it's $4 per gallon. And I need this amount of money to magically come out. Ooh. Okay. Say equals 5. Why did I say equals 5? Okay, I did something kind of crafty here. I was mean. M represents the number of miles that they want to drive fewer, right? So this decrease in mileage, I want the dollar amount to come out to $5. That's what I'm going to do here. I think we're done. Rearrange my equation. That was really horrible. Okay, when I first did that question, I was like dead certain I had it right. Like I was so certain I thought they had a typo on the internet. I was like, no, I did it. And when I originally set it up, I kept solving for M, meaning M was the number of miles that he was driving. Like, I got real confused about it, is what happened. So sorry, Pearson. I'm sorry. I almost wrote them a nasty letter saying that they screwed up. I can't read. So when I originally solved this question, like when I personally was taking this test, I didn't read this part very carefully. And I thought M represented, like, how many miles, like, was he going to drive next week in total? Not necessarily how many fewer miles than he drove right now. That was really hard, guys. I'm sorry. That was really bad. So yeah, that would have been a great one to skip if you ran out of time. Now we are actually through the no calculator part, which we should have been beginning to end 25 minutes. And you will be 25 minutes from beginning to end there, guys. I think y'all, the fact that you're here for tutoring, you drop it off. Thank you. You rock.
Mr. Engler was listening great to the chair.
All right, so you guys will know to not ever waste any time on the test, right? That's a given for this group. So you finish the test, you have 4 minutes left, you don't go, oh cool, I get to take a 4-minute power nap. Like, that's not something you're gonna do on this test. You're gonna go back to that horrible question about mileage and try it again, right? By the way, on that mileage question, if for some reason you find yourself with extra time, at that point, what you should be doing then is thinking of a real life example, right? You guys, most of you drive cars and you think about gas and how much it costs and what it, you know, how much it will change your overall gas cost if you drive fewer miles. So on that gas question, if you had time at the end and you started plugging in things that like were realistic to you for those unknown variables M, then maybe you could figure it out that way. All right, so now we are back on this is the larger portion of the test. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but the calculator portion of the test is bigger than the non-calculator portion. Yes. It's the whole packet. They're all together. I'm sorry, guys. But I will get you one tomorrow. I apologize. So you turn the page. They say pencils up, get going. And you have, I always forget this one. Is it 50 minutes? 55 minutes for 38 questions. Well, that seems nice. We'll probably have like a vacation at the end of it, right? Nope. Now, the fact that they're allowing you to use your calculator is nice, but also you can technically do this test without a calculator. So like different test, I was taking my ACT. My calculator died on question 2.
You couldn't get another one?
Nope. Once you start testing, you have what you have. So you can do them without calculator. It's not fun. It's not fun. All right. So I turn the page. Question 1. Is this where I start? Nope. I skip forward until I find the gridded response. It's towards the back. It's a lucky room for you. If you take your real test in here, you'll have me.
It wasn't a really lucky one.
No? Okay. Okay, so maybe traumatic is the better word for it? Okay. All right. So, my friends who haven't... Did you go too far? It's not all the way to the back. There's some blank weirdness in the back. It'll be question 31 is where it starts. So, there's going to be some gridded response here. Guys, the directions, the formula sheets, all that stuff does not change. So you shouldn't be reading over any of that during time. You shouldn't be wasting your time. We've already discussed this morning, so sorry for repeating it. But for those of you who are curious, if you've never filled out a gridded response, there's multiple ways to fill them out sometimes. There's also wrong ways to fill them out. So it will not accept mixed number fractions. Like, for instance, 1 3/4 is your answer. You cannot bubble in 1 3/4. You'd have to change it to a decimal, or you'd have to change it to an improper fraction. So just be careful how you're bubbling them in. And you do have to fill out the boxes, plus you have to fill out the bubbles. You have to do both. A lot of kids think they'll just do the bubbles and then they'll save amount of... I love this. I'll save time by not filling out the boxes. How much time do you think you saved not filling out those boxes exactly is my first question. And secondly, they look at the boxes if there's a misread on the bubble sheet. So like, yeah, you should have them both filled out. And then last year it broke my heart because the kid in my room didn't fill out the bubbles at all. Just filled out like 25 at the box at the top. I was like, ah. So please don't. No, but I stared at him with laser beam eyes. He didn't catch me. No, I can't do anything during testing. It's horrible. Okay, so here we are. 31. You all have your calculator back in front of you now. That's good. So now you feel good. Feel confident. Horsepower and watts are units of measure. They are directly proportional. That's a good math word. Proportional means you can write a proportion. And because it says directly, that means it's just a traditional proportion, such that 5 horsepower is equal to 3730 watts. Oh, guys, this is so easy. First question right out of the gate. Look at this. Just make sure you set up your proportion properly. Horsepower over watts. So horsepower over watts. Thank goodness there's a calculator, because at this point in your test, you're very fried, and you know in theory you could multiply this and divide this by hand, but you're not going to. And you're going to get an answer, and that's a great one, and you're going to share it with me. Where are you at, paper? Yeah, there we go. Did you get 1492? Or is it just me?
Oh, no, I got that.
Oh, good. And then you said Columbus sailed the ocean blue? Yeah. There. Isn't that cute? Don't you think they did that on purpose? Is that even right? Is that the right year? Do I have the wrong year? Okay. It's not 1492, you idiot. Okay, so. Now, am I going to get my question right? No, because what did I forget to do? I filled the bubbles. Let's pretend I did. Okay. Well, I know. That'd be a bummer, right?
I thought you were saying this is the wrong answer. I was like,
Just you and me. 1492 all the way. Okay, so 32. Just started the test, so I know this should be a comfortable problem. I shouldn't panic yet. I know there's words, but teacher told me words mean good things, so here we go. Painting of the Starry Night by Vince, blah, blah, blah. Okay, a rectangular shape with height 29 inches and width of that. Cool. A reproduction is made with dimensions 1/3 the original dimension. What is the height? So that tells me I do not need the width, right? Has nothing to do with this problem. I need to figure out 1/3 of this. So then this is where kids are like, what? 29/3 is a great answer, guys. Yeah. Yeah, you can. They will also accept, I wrote down what the key said. This cracks me up. It's like 9.6 repeating. So they'll take 9.67. They will also take 9.66 for some reason. Now the math teacher in me goes, what? No. They're a little loosey-goosey on the SAT. They figure you got to that point, they're happy. Now, me, I like exact answers, so I'm going to write 29/3. All right, moving along, feeling good. Uh-oh, geo time. But y'all know these are the one questions you liked in geometry because they were secretly algebra questions, right? You were like, ha, I see what you did there, teacher. You brought back algebra. And y'all loved algebra, I assume. That's why you're here. Now, guys, that note is important, but really it's a little misleading because kids look at that and they're like, oh, they must have been trying to trick me or something. No, that's just like a safety measure on their part. Someone, if they're not told explicitly that it's not drawn to scale, they could come back and argue that the question's invalid. So just whatever. Here we go. PQ is equal to RS. So for algebra, that means I should set those equal to each other. And then, of course, I'm going to carefully solve this for x. So let's see, I'm going to add 7. Now notice, I'm doing like the little kid thing you guys used to do. And I'm showing all my algebra moves, which I know, yes, it does slow you down. However, I think it might be worth slowing yourself down a little bit here, guys, because this is where mistakes happen, unfortunately. And usually when I say that, I like comically make a mistake. Like literally the moment I said mistakes happen here. Is x equals 3 is our answer right now? And a lot of kids get very excited in geometry because that is not the question. Did they say what is x? No. What do they want? So they want the length of the entire line segment. You know x is 3. Go back to your picture and plug in x equals 3. So 3 minus 1 is 2. This is 3. This is another 2. How long is this segment? 7. I think y'all can figure out how to bubble in a 7. Oh, by the way, don't be that weird kid who says, I'm going to bubble in 0007. I don't know. I mean, they never explicitly tell us whether they accept that answer. But I just figure, like, this is not the time in your life to be weird. Like, I'm just a creative soul, and I like to bubble in things weird. No, just don't. Alright, so we have, okay, this is called a coordinate geometry problem. So, like, it is technically geometry, but it's, like, really algebra because it's in the coordinate plane. So it has the ordered pair 2, 5 lies on a graph. And tell me about this graph if it's in the form k minus x squared. What does it look like? What kind of a graph would have an x squared in it? Let's start there. It's a quadratic, a parabola. Tell me more about this parabola. If it's got a negative in front of the x squared, it's reflected. Yes, it's a reflected parabola. I don't even think I need to know that. All right, so they did give you an ordered pair. Hey, what do ordered pairs mean? X and Y. F of x is just fancy for y. Guys, just plug in what you know. Y is 5. I don't know k. X squared would be like 2 squared. That'd be a 4. So if you were to solve this for k, I think we're home free, guys. Add 4, add 4, k is 9. They want the value of k, bubble in a 9. You got that. Okay, now, are you getting a little nervous? We're getting towards the end of the test, right? So this is the appropriate moment to go, okay, I think it might step up a moment here. It's okay, guys. If we hit a question here where we're like, oh boy, it's okay to skip or come back to it later. However, I will tell you guys, if you're running out of time, these aren't really the ones that you're going to be able to figure something out at the last minute, okay? So you're just going to make a guess and never probably come back to it again is my assumption. Let's see. Do I have any notes about how tricky these are? Not yet. Okay. The landscaper is designing a rectangular garden. The length, okay, I feel like a picture. The length of the garden is 5 feet longer than the width. The area of the garden is 104. What is the length? Okay. Well, this is like, we've done like 400 of these in algebra. Remember these? They make you do these a lot. So the length is 5 longer than the width. So let's call the width x or w or something. Let's call the length 5 longer, so x plus 5. And then how do you find the area of a rectangle? And if you don't remember, they put it on the formula sheet in the front.
It's length times width.
It's length times width. So if I was to multiply x times x plus 5, the area has to equal 104. Keep that in mind. Now this is the... I love these questions, because every year in algebra that we do these, a kid would be like, oh, Mrs. Abruzzo, I don't like solving quadratics. I'm just going to plug in numbers until I figure it out. You can. Assuming that it's an integer. I mean, are integers the only like numbers out there in the world? Is there anything here that says your length must be like an exact number of feet? So that might be a little weird to start just plugging in random numbers until you figure it out. I'm just saying. This one happens to be an integer though, so if that was your route, you would have got the right answer. But guys, y'all love quadratics. I know you do secretly. Choose your favorite method. Factoring is probably where most of you will go, yeah. Did anyone remember that this is a graphing problem? Could also be a graphing problem, right? You could use your... Now, there's nothing saying you have to use a graphing calculator on an SAT test, but you guys are very blessed in our district that we give you graphing calculators if you don't have one. Mostly. So if you were looking to save energy or time, which it is a matter of saving energy at this point, do you guys think there's anything wrong with just graphing this? Like, you could have done this into y1 and this into y2, and you could have saw where they crossed and went, boom, I got my answer. However, remember, guys, they do not want x. What do they want? What is the length? Which one did we say was the length? X plus 5. So keep that in mind if you're using the graphing calculator approach. Now, my friends who are just old school factoring with me, because I just love a good factoring question. Oh boy, 104, that just rolls right off the brain, doesn't it? 13 and something, because the answer's 13. 13 and 8, yeah. All right, so is it x minus 8 and x plus 13? So your solutions are x equals 8, and this one's going to be a garbage solution. So then how many kids do you think go and bubble in x equals 8, or if they bubble in 8? Because I know I would have. Because in math, we teach you to find x, right? But does this question want x?
No.
No, this question wants the length. So the length is 13. The answer is 13. Oh, I feel incomplete if we stop there. Let me look ahead. Hold on. No, you can't go to practice. No, go to practice. All right. I think we will actually stop there because the next 3 questions all go together. That feels like a good moment to stop.